Happy Easter. Thank you. This weekend in all the readings, at least some reference, if they don't say the word shepherd, they imply it. And I was a few years ago assigned at a parish, and there was actually two assistants at this parish. It was a very big parish, and the other assistant was came from a farming family, and they took care of sheep. And we also took care of this small country parish also. And so this priest would use a lot of farming references that the few farmers that we saw totally understood and everyone else was confused by. And so hearing from the farmers one weekend, I commented on sheep being generally known as very dumb animals. And all the farmers seemed to totally agree with that, except for this priest. He was like, no, sheep are incredibly smart animals. I don't know what you're talking about. And I was like, I don't know, dude, like whatever. But one of the things one of the farmers told me was they might be dumb animals, but they're obedient animals. And they'll actually learn the farmer's voice so well that say there's like this pasture where there's a lot of shepherds there with a lot of different sheep. And if the shepherd just simply calls out, and not necessarily even very loud, the sheep will hear it and instinctively walk out. Just his sheep will walk out from the fold. I've never seen it, but that sounds kind of cool to me. Just the sight of that. So it is important that the sheep know the voice of their shepherd, and the shepherd has the responsibility of keeping safe their sheep. We hear in the first reading St. Peter, who's already taken on this role of being the father of this community. And so they start calling him Papa, which eventually becomes Pope. And they're hearing his voice. He's calling them out, repent and be baptized. And 3,000 of them are baptized and follow him after that. So there is something about the voice. Jesus even comments on it, just the necessity for the sheep to know the voice of the shepherd. So ultimately, Jesus is the shepherd of the church. He's the head of the church. And then we have the Pope, who we call the vicar of Christ on earth. He stands for the universality of the church. And it's important that we know the Pope's voice. Especially in 2023, it's the easiest time in human history to know what the Pope says. From what I read in the history books, when certain councils happened, in the year 1000, the year 1500s, it took a couple decades for it to kind of pass through the church for people to realize what had been adjusted. But right now, we can hear the Pope's voice every day if we wanted to. It's important that we know our shepherd of this specific diocese voice. It's important that we know what Bishop Lou sounds like and what he's saying. If I were to guess, my guess is that on a given week and possibly even a month, maybe even so far as a year, what the Pope says and what the Bishop says has very little implication in your life. Other than maybe hearing in the news what one of them may or may not have said, it's not that big of a deal in your life. I'm not saying anything bad or mean about either of them, but my guess is that as you're living your life, we're probably not totally enthralled with what those two are doing. In June of last year, the bishop assigned me to be his representative here at the parish. And so on a week in and week out basis, you hear my voice. Right? I'm the most immediate shepherd to the area. And so you probably do know my voice. On my first weekend, I have this theory for priest's first weekend, and I actually think it's the most important weekend that a priest has at a parish because it sets a tone. And what I have at least seen a lot of priests do is their first weekend, all they talk about is themselves. And so their first homily barely talks about Jesus and very much talks about themselves. And I think it sets a tone. I think it's a bad tone. And so I did my best to not do that my first weekend, to just keep the focus on Jesus. But it's probably the case that you still don't necessarily know my story to know your shepherd very well. So I thought this weekend, as we're talking about shepherds, it's also this weekend, the fourth Sunday of Easter is always called Good Shepherd Sunday. Thought I might just share my vocation story with you so you can know a little bit about my life. I was born in Palos Heights, Illinois. My family is largely from the Joliet area. My dad and mom moved to Florida for a little while right after I was born, and then on their way back to Joliet, to Mokina, they stopped through Bloomington where my uncle already was there and working, and we kind of just never left. My dad got a job there the next day working with my uncle, and so Bloomington is really all that I know. I know the Mokina area a little bit, but not enough to really get around comfortably. My parents divorced pretty quickly right after that, and so I only know divorce. I have one memory of my parents still being together. We had kind of like a balcony-like thing, and there was a spiral staircase that came down, and my mom is upstairs yelling about something. I don't exactly know what, but she's upstairs yelling, and my dad is walking down the spiral staircase, and he is he's pointing towards heaven, but not with his pointer fingers. That's my last memory of my parents in their blissful marriage. So pretty quickly right after they separated, and I largely grew up with my dad. And my dad was a car salesman, so it depended on the year as to what the sales were like, of what our life was like, of what things we could afford to do. When I was in 6th grade, we got a priest at my home parish who just took a special interest in my dad. He also liked cars, so there was some mutual interest there. And so my dad had kind of a small reversion. My parents are always faithful, but we never went to church. I didn't even know that Christmas was somehow related to Jesus until I was in high school. And so we barely ever went to church. And we went to CCD faithfully, but we never went to church. And so in 6th grade, my dad had a small reversion, and we went from not going to church really at all to all of a sudden my dad was like reading the Bible. My dad read that book by Scott Hahn, The Lamb's Supper, and it was a major impact in his life. And so we started going to church a lot more, and it had an impact on me. It became important. And I graduated 8th grade a couple years later. And the parish that we were a part of, which was a big parish in Bloomington, did a summer youth mission trip every year. And so I was now old enough to finally go. And so I went on this mission trip. And I think I've told you a little bit about this mission trip before. And there was a young man on the group who was already talking openly about going to seminary. He was going to be a junior, and I was going to be a freshman. And I thought to myself, what a loser. This guy wants to go to seminary. Like, doesn't he know how to talk to girls? Like, what the heck, And so I thought, I'm going to take him under my wing. I'll teach him a thing or two about how to talk to girls. And so it just so happened that our spots on the floor and this mission trip were right next to each other. And so one day, again, I might have shared this story before. He asked me if I wanted to go to church with him. And I was like, no way, man. People are going to think we're weird. And he's like, well, there's 2 girls from another group that are going to join us. And I was like, now we're talking. And so I went with him to Mass, and the priest, was what I always envisioned priests as being, which was, 45, bald and overweight. He matched that perfectly. It wasn't a particularly profound Mass. It wasn't celebrated all that reverently. But that was the first time that I ever came to believe that Jesus was truly present in the Eucharist. No one had ever told me that before. I had finished CCD, and no one had ever told me that Jesus was truly present in the Eucharist. And at this Mass, I had an encounter with Jesus truly present in the Eucharist. And at the age of 14, I did as all 14-year-old boys do best when something tragic or when something fantastic happens in their life, and I completely ignored it and just went on to freshman year of high school. I went on to my freshman year of high school, and I was, very gregarious and outgoing and whatnot, so I was at everything I possibly could be. Every sporting event, every, fun high school event I went to. I had befriended a senior girl, and I thought, I'm going to ask her if I can take her to her prom. And so I asked, and she said no. I finished my freshman year of high school and went on to my sophomore year, and we had just got a newly ordained priest at my home parish, and he asked me if I wanted to go on this camp for boys, for guys. And I said, well, what do they do with this guys camp? And they said, they do dude stuff. And I was like, I love playing sports and eating meat and farting and grunting. This sounds amazing. I'm in. And so I went to this camp, and, we show up, and I realized there's like priests and seminarians that are there. And I was like, you son of a gun, you tricked me. You brought me to a nerd camp. And I, was standing there kind of discouraged, and I'm going to have to spend these days with these nerds. And I saw one of the nerds, he picked up this disc, this round thing, and he just kind of threw it. He chucked it, and it kind of hovered across the ground, and another nerd caught it. And I was like, I didn't know nerds could do that. Another nerd picked up this ball that came to 2 points, and he threw it. And another nerd running across the field caught it. And I thought, I didn't know nerds could do that. And I realized pretty quickly it was just guys from around the diocese that got together every summer, and we played sports, we ate meat, we prayed together, and it really was a profound and awesome experience. That camp is called Emmaus Days, and from my looking at it in the last several years here at the parish, we haven't had any young men go to this. So I hope to change that this summer. While we were there, again, no one had ever told me Jesus was truly present in the Eucharist. I had certainly never heard of or seen adoration before. And so he's a priest now, but at the time his name was Deacon Tony Coe. Walked out they had a side chapel that had the tabernacle in it with this monstrance. Again, it just looked like this golden thing with a cracker in it to me. And placed it on the altar. And again, I had another Eucharistic experience. I started to get goosebumps. My heart started to race, and I knew I'm not just before a cracker, right? That's someone before me. And I finished up the camp, and I was 15 years old, and I did as all 15-year-old boys do best when they have a profound encounter, and I completely ignored it and went on to my sophomore year of high school. I got my first car. It was a rusted out 88 Nissan Sentra. It was awesome. It got like 45 miles to the gallon. Halfway through that year, that same priest asked me if I wanted to go to visit a seminary. And I said, you played too many cards this time, my friend. I know what you're on to. No. And he said, okay, but just so you know, we're leaving on a Sunday. We won't get back till Tuesday. And you don't have school on that previous Thursday or Friday, so you're missing out on a 6-day weekend. And I was like, I guess I can swing it, And so I went to visit the seminary, and again, I had certain thoughts of what I was going to experience, but I found that it was good men, college-age men who were just simply trying to ask the question, God, why did you make me? And I was really kind of enthralled by that. The last day that we were there, this priest who had polio as a child, so it was very painful for him to walk, said Mass for us. And he didn't say a very pious Mass or reverent Mass. It was just that it took so much effort for him to do. It was an encounter. And so when he held the Blessed Sacrament, again, I had another Eucharistic encounter. And it was powerful. But this time I had 6 hours of a drive back to finally start asking this priest that we were riding with, what is the Eucharist? Why should I care? Why did God make me? And it was an amazing drive back. I got back, and I wish I could say that I had, everything had changed about my life, but that wasn't true. But I began to ask the question, why God? Why did you make me? And then I began to pray, help me to want to be what you want me to be. I finished my sophomore year of high school. I had my first like actual real girlfriend. Nothing like the junior high things where you just like see each other at recess, but like a real girlfriend. And I accidentally told her that I loved her, dropping her off at her house one time. My family always says, "All right, love you, bye." And I said that, and she was like, "You do? I do too." And I was like, "No." And so for the next 2 months of our relationship, I had to say it every time I got on the phone and dropped her off. Um, Went on to my junior year of high school, and yeah, was just a normal student. But they started an adoration chapel just on the street from my home. And so what was just I would stop in, I don't know, once a week, once a month, and just kind of give a long genuflection. I would go into the back of the adoration chapel and just kneel down and say an Our Father, Hail Mary, and Glory be, make the sign of the cross, get up and walk out. That was all that I really did. And over time, that kept kind of extending the amount of time that I would be in there. And so by the end of my senior year of high school, I was sometimes in there for a whole half hour just praying. And as a kid who has ADD and everything catches my attention, that really was an amazing thing. And it just kind of became a regular part of my life, was to stop in the Adoration Chapel. And I was set and ready to go to a trade school at the end of high school, and I was very excited to do that. But this idea kept weighing in the back of my mind of what if God made me to be a priest? And so the kind of the priest that I was kind of weighing on with good advice said, "There's no downside of you trying seminary right now. If you get an actual job and you have like a career, this can be more difficult to try seminary. But right now, you're the most free to try it. I know school is not your favorite part of life, but just I think you should give it a shot." And so I did. I went to seminary out of high school in Winona, Minnesota. And I had 2 truly amazing years. It really was awesome. Uh, that second year, I started to get in my head how great it would be if I went back to Illinois State University and, was just a knucklehead with my friends and a regular college student. And that just kept weighing on me and weighing on me. So after 2 years of seminary, I left seminary. I went to Illinois State University. I had an apartment, not on campus. I was off campus, but uh, and I just was a normal college student. They had a Catholic center there on campus, and so I would show up at the Catholic center and try to make friends and all that stuff. And Catholic centers oftentimes are different from regular university students because they find value in traditional living, and so oftentimes single women at a Catholic Newman Center are very much pursuing husbands. And so when you show up as a former seminarian, you're a total piece of meat to them. And so I showed up, and they're like, "You're going to be better than all the rest of them." And I was like, "No, I won't." And so girls that were way out of my league were pursuing me. I became very close with one girl while I was there that year. And a girl that, again, was way out of my league, very beautiful, very lovely to be around. And I liked her. I liked her a lot. And it started to cross my mind, I wonder, is this going to be the one? But we, try to be very particular about our relationship and not move too fast. And she also would kind of get frustrated with me because I didn't live on campus, but I also knew all the priests and parishes in town, so I was involved with everything also at parishes while I was there. And she didn't like that I wasn't as free to hang out with her as she wanted, or I wasn't free to like go to mass with her or adoration with her. And so I knew I didn't want to lose her. And so I knew that I had to ask her to be my girlfriend. And so I was a broke college student, and I got up all the quarters and nickels from the couches and took her to the finest place that money could buy. And so we're sitting at McDonald's, and I look across the table and I say to her, "You're the most beautiful girl I've ever met in all my life." and I really like you. And I just wanted you to know that. And she said, I think you should go back to seminary. She paid for her own meal that night, and but I had to ask myself, why would she say that? What does she see that I'm not recognizing right now? And so I allowed that to kind of have an impact in my life. And I began to ask, maybe she's right. I really left seminary because I thought of how great it would be to be a college student, not because I actually thought that God wasn't calling me. And so after that year, I returned to seminary. I returned to Winona, Minnesota. I had to take 21 credit hours both semesters just to pass or to graduate on time. Graduated, I went out east for my graduate studies and actually started to think about leaving again. And was kind of starting to wade back and forth on what to do. And the seminary rector at the time was actually a priest from our diocese. His name is Monsignor Stephen Rolfs. And he could see that was happening, so he called me into his suite. Now, generally what happens when he was the rector, if you got called to his office, he might yell at you, he might not, but he didn't think you were going to leave his office in tears. If you got called to his quarters, he expected you to be crying by the time he was done. And so when I got called to his suite, I was like, no. And so I went up there, and he just knew exactly what to say and exactly how to say it to kind of convict my heart. And I left that room convinced that God wanted me to be a priest. And not that the rest of the schooling was easy or anything like that, but I went about it very differently. I was ordained a priest in 2015, and yeah, I've kind of bounced around the diocese since then, and yeah, had a lot of good experiences, a lot of good people, met a lot of different pastoring styles, a lot of different communities and how they go about things. I'm profoundly thankful that God chose me to be a priest. It really is a wonderful life. The most difficult days, the days where I get cussed out by someone for things that I have nothing to do with, it's all worth it. I love every second of being a priest. I wake up every morning excited. It's not difficult for me to get out of bed when the alarm goes off. All the announcements were made last weekend of all the different parishes where priests would be moving, and obviously nothing was said here. I'm happy to, get another year at least with you all, and profoundly grateful for this amazing year so far. And you really are amazing people, and thank you for having me for at least one more year.